Hello, Oscar. Grandpa here. Hope you're well, and Mummy and Daddy are well, and your little sister Annabelle, she's well too. And it's hello from me, and hello from Moosey. You've been good, Moosey? Yeah, I've been good. Yeah, Moosey's really good, and helps me in the study. Looks after all my papers, don't you? Yeah, I do. And it's love from me and from Granny and Auntie Anna, who's in Spain as we speak at the moment at her place in Spain, having fun in the sun, I would hope. Anyway, a little bit more to finish up on how to train your dragon, and hopefully we'll be able to start a new book. I think it's called How to Be a Pirate. That sounds exciting. Which will start hopefully next week. Anyway, just going back a little bit, if you remember, Hiccup had gone into the mouth of the green, horrible, dragony thing, and Toothless had refused to join in. But Toothless saved the day, and the dragon finally sneezed, and Hiccup, the spear, Toothless, and a great deal of perfectly revolting snot were scattered around the surrounding countryside, and there was there was Hiccup being exploded out of the dragon's mouth. Toothless remembered as he was shooting through the air that boys can't fly. He folded his wings and dived after Hiccup, who was rapidly heading towards the ground. Toothless grabbed hold of Hiccup by the arm and tried to take his weight. Dragon's talons are extraordinarily strong, and he was able to break Hiccup's fall, not entirely, but enough so that when Hiccup crashed into the heather, he was travelling reasonably slowly. Stoik came plunging frantically through the grass. He picked up his son and faced the monster, holding his shield over Hiccup's unconscious body. Toothless hid behind Stoik. The Green Death had recovered from his sneezing fit. He shuffled forwards, bleeding horribly from fatal wounds to his chest and throat. Yuck, horrible, Oscar. He lowered his terrible head till it was on a level with the cliff top, and his evil yellow eyes looked straight at Stoik. Time to die for all of us, purred the Green Death. You can't save his life now, you know. You are quite helpless. My fire will melt that shield like butter. The Green Death opened his mouth. He slowly sucked in a breath. Stoik tried to grab onto chunks of heather to hold them fast, but Stoik, Hiccup, and Toothless were being dragged slowly but surely towards the gigantic black tunnel that was the monster's open jaws. The Green Death paused for a moment before he blew out again, enjoying their terror. This is what happens if you don't listen to the dragon law, shrieked Toothless to himself in horror as he peered round the side of Stoik's cloak. The monster puffed out his cheeks, and Stoik and Toothless waited for flames to consume them. But no fire came out. The Green Death looked very surprised. He puffed out his cheeks and blew a little harder, and again no fire. And of course, what had happened was that when Hiccup had been in his mouth, he had taken off his helmet and plugged the horns as hard as he could, his helmet horns, into the dragon's fire holes, hadn't he? And it was a perfect fit. So when the dragon tried to use his fire, the blockage caused to build up a pressure that eventually grew so great that the green dragon simply exploded. Now there were pieces of dragon flying in all directions. Stoik and Toothless were incredibly lucky not to get hit by anything standing as close to the explosion as they were. But a single burning dragon tooth, 8 feet long, one of the monster's smaller ones, exploded straight towards Hiccup. The boy had been dragged out from under the shelter of Stoik's shield by the intake of the monster's breath and was now lying on the ground a couple of feet in front of Stoik and Toothless, completely exposed. Stoik caught the movement of the tooth out of the corner of his eye and flung himself and his shield forward. So Stoik's shield did save Hiccup's life after all. If he had not been there, the tooth would have impaled Hiccup like a prawn on a stick. As it was, it buried itself deep into the bronze centre of the shield and quivered there, blazing with green-age dragon flames. Stoik lifted the shield, terrified that the tooth might have pierced through to his son, but Hiccup was unharmed. And then Hiccup, they listened to the strange sound that came from the tooth. It was a song from the green dragon, from the tooth. It went something like this. I tell the mighty big blue whale his life is over soon. With one swish of this armoured tail, I put out the sun and moon. The winds and gales are quivering when I begin to roar. The waves themselves are shivering and trembling back to shore. Listen, said Hiccup happily, just before he passed out. The supper is singing. The 400 Vikings that were now gathered. Chapter 20, Hiccup the Useful. The 400 Vikings that were now gathered on the cliff tops broke into wild cheering for Hiccup and Toothless. They were a strange barbaric sight, all covered in disgusting green dragon snot. Can you imagine that, Oscar? And slime, but beaming and shouting with the wild delight of those that had just been saved from the certain death. All around them, the terrible fight that had just taken place devastated the landscape. A choking green-grey smoke was hanging around, making it difficult to see, but great chunks of Death's Head headland appeared to have been torn out by the fight. Avalanches of rock were piled up on the beach. However, by some extraordinary miracle, nearly all the Vikings and their dragons had survived the dreadful battle. I say nearly all because when Toothless crept forward to lick the face of his master with a flickering forked tongue, Stoic noticed a ghastly wound on the little dragon's chest. Oh no, look, there he is. Don't worry, Oscar, all will become good. Stoic, the talon of the Green Death had pierced the very heart of the supposedly heartless little dragon. Toothless followed Stoic's gaze and looked down for the first time. He let out a squeal of terror and fainted, dead away. Oh. 2 days later, Hiccup woke up, aching all over and very, very hungry. It was late at night. He was lying in Stoic's own great bed. The room seemed to be crowded with a great deal of people. Stoic was there, and Valharama and Old Wrinkly and Fishlegs and most of the elders of the tribe. There were dragons there too, Newt's Breath and Hookfang snapping and biting around Stoic's leg, and Horror Cow perched on the end of Hiccup's bed. The dragons had flown back as soon as they heard the explosion and realised the masters of Berk were masters once more. Being dragons, they had given no explanation for their disappearance, but they did have the grace to look a little sheepish. He's alive, shouted out Stoic in triumph, and everybody began to cheer. Valharama gave Hiccup a rousing punch on the shoulder, which is the Viking mother's equivalent of a really big hug. We're all here, said Valharama, willing you to wake up. Hiccup sat straight up in bed and suddenly very awake indeed. But we're not all here, he said. Where's Toothless? Everybody looked shifty and nobody would look at Hiccup. Stoic cleared his throat awkwardly. I'm sorry, son, said Stoic, but he didn't make it. He died just a few hours ago. The rest of the tribe are giving him a hero's funeral at this very moment. It's a great honour, Stoic continued hurriedly. He'll be the first dragon ever to be given a proper Viking burial. How did you know he was dead? Hiccup demanded. Stoic looked surprised. Well, you know, the usual, no pulse, no breath, stone cold to the touch. He was quite clearly dead, I'm afraid. Oh, honestly, Father, said Hiccup in a frenzy of exasperation. Don't you know anything about dragons? That could have been a sleep coma. It's a good sign, probably means he's healing himself. Oh, Thor's whiskers, said Fishlegs. They started that funeral half an hour ago. We've got to stop them, yelled Hiccup. Dragons are only fairly fireproof. They'll burn him alive. Hiccup leapt out of bed with amazing energy under the circumstances. He ran out of the room and out of the house, followed closely by Fishlegs and Horror Cow. Down at Hooligan Harbour, the awesome ceremony of the Viking military funeral was nearly coming to an end. It was an incredible sight if Hiccup had been in the mood for it. The sky was crammed with stars. The sea was glass flat. The entire tribes of Hooligan and Meathead were gathered motionless on the rocks, and every single person was carrying a lighted torch in one hand. Even Snotlight was there, trying to look solemn, with his helmet off his head out of respect and his hair neatly brushed. Good riddance to the newt with wings, he was whispering slyly to Dog's Breath the Durbrain, and Dog's Breath sniggered. Serving right for breaking the law, sneered Farwell to Sea Slug, who was picking his nose on Dog Breath's shoulder. Ooh, hope you don't pick your nose, Oscar. A replica of a Viking ship had been put out to sea and was drifting swiftly away from the island of Berk along the path of the moon's reflection, past the weird shapes of Stoic and Mogadon's burnt-out fleet. Hiccup could just see the small body of Toothless laid out in the boat. Beside him lay Stoic's shield, the dragon's tooth still stuck in it like a gigantic alien sword. Gobber the Belch sounded the mournful signal on his horn. He was now completely recovered after his unexpected flight. Pop! 26 of Stoic's finest archers, standing to attention at the right of the harbour, lifted their arrows lifted their bows into the air. Every bow was loaded with an arrow in flame. No, no, yelled Hiccup, the best yell he had ever yelled, but it was too late. The flaming arrows soared gracefully through the air. They landed on the ship and set it alight. Look, there's Hiccup going, no, no, look at his hands. Some of the crowd on the shore turned to look upwards, wondering who dared to disturb this most solemn ritual. Hiccup, shouted Thuggery the meathead, joyfully recognising the figure on the horizon. There was a murmur of wonder from the crowd as they whispered Hiccup to each other. Then shouting and cheering and calling out his name louder and louder, Snotlight's jaw dropped open. He looked thoroughly disappointed to see Hiccup very much alive and well. Snotlight could just about take Hiccup as a dead hero, but a living Hiccup the hero was going to be very much in the way. Hiccup was watching the burning ship, tears pouring down his face. Oh wow, there's the ship with the arrows. Look, the burning arrows coming towards it. Ooh, what's going to happen next? The boat tipped and Stoic's shield and the tooth fell into the water. Just as the last piece of the boat was about to slip under the waves to be consumed by fire and water, the flames reared up about 20 feet in the sky, and shooting out of these flames, wings spread like a phoenix, trailing fire from his tail like a comet. Came, guess who, Oscar? Yep, that's right, Toothless. He soared high, high, high into the stars, leaving a path of flame as he flew. He dived down, down, down towards the sea and swooped up at the last minute to cries of wonder from the spectators. Hiccup was anxious that he might be in pain until Toothless zoomed low enough over his head for Hiccup to hear the little dragon's rooster cry of triumph. Whatever Toothless's faults may have been, you have to admire his sense of occasion. Common or garden dragons are not normally known for their spectacular flying skills, but even a common or garden dragon on fire is a spectacle in itself. Toothless burned through the night sky like a live firework, performing screaming fiery somersaults and flaming loop-the-loops. There he is there, look, screaming through the sky. The crowd, who only a moment before were expecting to mourn the deaths of both Toothless and possibly Hiccup, were now beside themselves, hysterically cheering as Toothless showered them with sparks. At last the fire got too hot for him and Toothless, Toothless plunged into the sea to extinguish himself, only to burst out again and fly straight to Hiccup's shoulder. There he acknowledged the wild applause with solemn bows to right and left, slightly spoiling his dignity with the odd cock-a-doodle-doo of smug self-congratulation. Stoic signalled to the crowd for silence, but only so he could boom out the following speech at full blast. Hooligans and meatheads, terrors of the seas, sons of Thor, and most feared masters of the dragon, I feel humbled to present you with the most recent member of the hooligan tribe. I give you my son, Hiccup the Useful. Ah, that's fantastic, isn't it, Oscar? And the words Hiccup the Useful came echoing down from the hills behind and were shouted back again by the cheering crowd and were picked up and carried on the night breeze until the whole world seemed to be telling Hiccup that maybe he was going to be useful after all. Well, of course he was, wasn't he, Oscar? And that, my friends, that is the hard way to become a hero. Now, a closing little bit by Hiccup, Horrendous Haddock III, the last of the great Viking heroes. The story doesn't end there, of course. The 19 boys who entered initiation with me those many years ago were all allowed into the hooligan and meathead tribes as a result of their heroic actions in defeating two sea dragonus giganticus maximus in one day. The battle at Death's Head Headland has passed into Viking legend and will be sung about by the bards while there are still bards to sing. Of course, there are very few bards left nowadays. What is more, few have seen a sea dragonus giganticus maximus since, and people are already starting to disbelieve that such a creature could have lived. Learned articles have been written suggesting that something that large simply could not have sustained its own weight. The dragons that would be my evidence have crawled back into the sea where men cannot follow, and what with heroism being so unfashionable nowadays, nobody is going to believe the mere word of a hero like myself. But one thing about dragons, and I'm a person who knows about dragons, is that it could very well be that they are merely sleeping down there in the black depths. There could be numberless numbers of them all frozen in a sleep coma, with the unknowing fishes swimming in and out of their tentacles and hiding in their talons and laying eggs in their ears. There may yet come a time when heroes are needed once more. There may yet come a time when the dragons will come back. When that time comes, men will need to know something about how to train them and how to fight them, and I hope this book will be more helpful to the heroes of the future than a certain book of the same name was to me all those many years ago. So Hiccup's now grown up writing this. It is easy to forget that there were such things as these monsters. I forget myself sometimes, but then I look up as I'm looking up now, and I see in my mind's eye a shield, strangely changed by rich encrusting of jewel-like barnacles and cold water coral with an 8-foot tooth sticking right out of the middle of it. I reach out, and the edge of that tooth is still so bitingly sharp after all these years that just a gentle brush with the fingers might send a rain of blood down on these pages. And I bend my head not too close, and I'm sure I can just hear very, very faintly. Once I set the sea alight with a single fiery breath. Once I was so mighty that I thought my name was death. Sing out loud until you're eaten, song of melancholy bliss. For the mighty and the middling, all shall come to this. The supper is still singing.
Wow.
That's the end of that story, Oscar. And it's going to be a new book, as I say, hopefully next week. So it's hope you enjoyed it. Lots of love from me and Granny and Auntie Anna and everybody. And lots of love to you, Mummy and Daddy, and little Annabelle. And I hope you have a lovely time. Lots of love. Bye. Bye.